The minimalists want to help you avoid impulse purchases. That's why we created 5 questions to ask before buying, which is now a wallpaper for your smartphone. Now you'll always have a reminder when you're getting ready to purchase something new. Head on over to theminimalists.com/before to download your free wallpaper today.
The Minimalists.
Is it acceptable if I intentionally choose not to vote?
Jonathan, I think it's absolutely acceptable if you choose not to vote. And my question to anyone who would disagree with that is, okay, then, would you like to make it a law requiring people to vote? If you believe that it's so unacceptable, if you believe that people ought to do it, and it's some sort of blasphemous, unforgivable sin, then do you believe there should be a law that requires people to do this morally good thing? If you do, I want to hear what that argument looks like. I'm interested.
That's Australia.
Yeah,
a lot of countries have that.
Yeah. And I like to hear from those who think you should have it. I'm adamantly against that. I think that'll be the antithesis of freedom. But if you don't believe that it's a law, then you absolutely have the right to choose not to vote, right? And for me, I don't believe in validating systems based on a need to assuage the guilt that other people might impose upon me. If I'm going to do something, it's because I believe in that system for myself. And I believe that what I'm doing matters. Now, you can't make a decision based on my belief. You don't believe what I believe. You don't know what I know. Maybe you haven't experienced what I've experienced. But if you're going to do anything at all, whether it be voting or not voting, you ought to do it based on your own research, on your own reflection, not because someone says, I'm not going to approve of you if you don't bow down and worship the nation's true God.
Right.
Because that is the true God of this nation.
Sure.
We give lip service to the idea of this being a Christian nation, but you go talk to people about Jesus Christ or about the Bible, and you'll find out really quickly that we don't tolerate people who preach about things, who tell us what to do. The only thing you can get away with if you want to preach in this country is that. Go out and vote.
Yeah.
So that's the true religion. And I don't think you should follow any religion.
TK, what would
you based on people trying to guilt trip you. Yeah.
What would you say? And let me start with, I have not voted in more elections than I voted with, for a lot of the reasons you've saying. So this isn't coming from an argument place. But what would you say if, I don't think it's taking away your freedoms. I think it's taking away your freedoms if they tell you how to vote. Or if it's like, here are 2 candidates, you're forced to vote for one of them. But what would you say if it was, let's say, a law that you had to vote, but because of that, because now millions more people are involved and invested, that maybe we also make it a national holiday so that it expands who can vote. Maybe we also have more access to who gets to run, to who gets in the debates. What if, like, making it a law and everyone votes, we actually, that's the first step in actually, like, fixing the system. So we can hear from more Andrew Yangs. We can get the Unity Party on the ballot. We can do, because now it's all like, oh, well, we all kind of have this responsibility. So let's fix it so maybe you would actually want to vote in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. There's this excellent book by James P. Carse called Finite and Infinite Games, a vision of life as play and possibility. And one of the things he says is that the first rule of play is that he who must play cannot play. The moment you require it, it ceases to be the thing that it is. Now, I believe that our 2 primary sources of power in a voluntary society is voice and exit. It's the ability to say what we really think, or it's the ability to opt out of systems that we believe in. And that ability to opt out of systems that we believe in by saying, I am going to invest my energy in building up alternatives or in focusing on other things is a huge source of power. And it doesn't really get talked about in the context of the political religion that I criticize. But we wouldn't have the freedom to not vote unless there was a certain source of power that lied in our ability to say, I choose not to play by the rules of this system. I choose to question the validity of this system. I choose to criticize it as a system that is not actually what it's presented to be.
Yeah, this is helping. Well, I brought it up at the end of the minimal about, if you don't vote, then I feel like you shouldn't have a right to rant about politics. But this is changing my mind. Like, I can totally see what you're saying. And I've heard people say that, well, me not voting, that is actually me exercising my vote. And what you just said has it's helped me actually see that point of view.
Well, and
What-
also,
oh,
one point to that is, because I hear that criticism as well. If you're not going to vote, then you don't have then you can't complain. And
Right.
but the things I complain about are things that neither choice would fix. They're not running on fixing those things. So I can complain about it all I want
Yeah.
and still withhold my vote for either of those candidates
Yeah.
because neither of them were campaigning on anything that I wanted them to fix.
You guys want to
point.
know the
It's a great
line I
point.
heard? Because I felt that for a very long time. And I loathe the Democratic establishment, even though I still consider myself liberal. But the line that got me this election season, that was like, piss milkshake, was Sharon Salzberg, who is a Buddhist meditation teacher. She had a line in her book where they go, well, there's only a marginal difference between Biden and Trump. And she goes, but people live in those margins. And that's when I was like, fuck.
That's why if I were to have voted for either of those two, I'm planning on third party or writing in, but
Yeah.
I think I would lean Trump.
You would lean Trump for that.
Yeah,
Wow.
I would. I would have. I think if I lived in a swing state,
Yeah.
I would have. I probably, after everything, I think I would have probably gone for Trump.
Expand on that.
I think he is less. I think the people that live in the margins are the people who are in our foreign policy is, I think, our number one issue in this country. We warmonger all around the world.
Yes.
We don't have the effects on us here in this country, so we seem to be kind of putting the blinders on. But to me, death, like life and death, is first and foremost because you can't make any other decisions if you're dead, right? So war is number one, and then that's when I put Medicare for all or healthcare system number two because that's also life and death.
Yes.
But the war issue, Trump has been since, depending on your definition, you could maybe say Carter, or you could, if you don't agree with Carter because of his role in the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, you could go back to Ford. He's the first president to not put new boots on the ground in any country.
Yeah.
And that is a huge, huge thing. I mean, he has ramped up in some areas and but definitely tried to dwindle back in others. But there are people that live in those margins, and those
Yeah.
margins happen to be places like Syria and
So
Afghanistan.
I love that you're saying that. I mean, I've become like homies with Tulsi. I'm like a huge fan of hers. And I got in a lot of trouble we were just talking about this in our little bathroom break. I got in a lot of trouble when I went on Conan, and I like Obama, the Obamas as people, but I criticized Obama for a lot of his drone strikes, and people were not happy about that. And so I agree with you 100%. I do wonder, however, what would happen if there was an attack on American soil under Trump, because we saw when he tried to undo a lot of the progress we've made with Iran. Now, it was with rhetoric. Nothing happened, and I think people were like, ugh, and like pulled him back from that, but we don't know. What would Trump's reaction be to? I mean, we see what happens when Trump gets a mean tweet. He's just like he goes to war. Like, what would happen?
But I
if there
think we
was an
do
attack?
know. I think we do know because look, any president knows, and if he really wanted to win a second term, any president knows in order to win, you just start a war.
Yeah, sure.
And he has had every opportunity to go to war, every opportunity to dispose leaders, such as in Venezuela. And he had both sides championing him on for that.
Yeah.
And he just refused to do it. I mean, he just does the bully talk.
Yeah.
And he said, you will unleash the full force of America
Yeah,
on you.
because that's all I hear. 'cause
Right,
I've never
but then
thought
he
about
doesn't
like
do
that.
it. But then he
Yeah.
doesn't ultimately go through with it, right? And even though he had every single warmonger on both sides, I mean, we saw it even at the State of the Union address where both Democrats and Republicans stood up and cheered for Guaido, and they want regime change down in Venezuela, and they would have wanted it militarily.
Yeah, of
and
course.
Trump is the one that said, nah, okay, we'll try it your way. He's kind of said to all of the warmongers around him, okay, we'll do it your way for a minute. And then when we're done with your way and when your way has failed, we're doing it my way. And that has been the criticism people have made where, well, he put more boots on the ground in Afghanistan, or he did more strikes in Syria, or he did, tried to do the regime change in Venezuela. But ultimately, he was doing it their way at first. And then he turned around, because this was all in Bolton's book, that, he came out, Bolton criticized Trump for being basically somebody who was saying we need to get out.
Yeah, Bolton, one of the most insane warmongers
Right.
of all time. This is Jamie Kilstein saying vote for Trump. But then what do you think about the healthcare? This is so interesting because I really never thought of it that way, because you're right. I will always hear the bully talk and the tweets.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've never really been like,
He's a showman.
right. They're like, oh, there are no. I do wonder what would happen if there was an attack on domestic soil. And I mean, one could argue we've seen violence go up when it comes to like white supremacy in America under Trump, right? But what about with the healthcare? Do you think that undoing? I'm not a fan of Obamacare. I think it was just kind of a wishy-washy thing that pissed off both sides.
Yeah.
But do you think that getting rid of some of the things that, like if we got rid of Obamacare, so for example, like the pre-existing conditions, especially under COVID, which is more of a conservative thing, does that go against what you were saying about healthcare being your number two?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The Republican Party, I think, is totally transformed under Trump, and I don't think there's any going back. As much as Mitch McConnell and a lot of these other guys that are the old guard of the Republican Party, I think they would like for it to return back to normal.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to be surprised to find out it will not. And if the Republican Party successfully, which they might if they were in power, successfully were to overturn Obamacare and get rid of it, quickly the base, which is now the working collar, blue collar base of the Republican Party, would start screaming, saying, now what are you going to give us? And they will have to replace it. They will not be able to get away with just going back to the way it was prior to Obamacare.
Right.
So it would be interesting to see. I just don't think we can go back. And I think the constituents and the voters would just, on the Republican side, would take I think it's just such a popular healthcare now. People are used to it. And once people are used to it, you can't take it away from them.